Previously in Hedge Knights. The 5 squires arrive at the teeny, pristine glade hopeful, but also haggard from their journey. With much haste, Lazarus and Sapo cleared the land for rice farming, while Megahoof worked to understand technologies that were nearly lost to time. Judea quickly constructed simple furnitures, while Tangier cut stone to be used for fortifications. A simple barracks was rapidly constructed, fitted with timber floors and multiple gates. A perimeter wall was built as a bulwark against the prospects of monstrous visitors raiding their hamlet. Lily and Mojo were even allotted a tract of land for grazing, and work started to build a tiny barn as well. Episode 2: Orphans. The 5 squires look out at the tiny little hamlet they've constructed in such a short period of time with considerable pride. The obstacles they faced to get here seemed almost insurmountable. They dodged patrols of hunters and metallic castles full of behemoths. And here they are in a tiny little glade that was very difficult to find. Back home, there was not industry, and there were no farms. The only farms that they had were tiny little gravel fields, deep in caves to grow mushrooms. The 5 have never tasted rice. Their forefathers passed down seeds saved before the Great Purge, seeds ready to be resown if the time ever arose that they could reclaim the land. So for the 5, it is very exciting to harvest rice for the first time. Sapo readies his cooking utensils, eager to cook and support this fledgling community with locally grown food, something adlets have not known for hundreds of years. Tangier chips away at the mountain. One thing that the adlets do know is that the pollution that blanketed the entire globe rarely penetrated mountains. It's mostly surface pollution. And for that reason, they're hopeful that they'll be able to expand within the hills of this hamlet. One thing they noticed when they arrived is that these strange, ugly, unknown to them twisted trees seem to be absorbing pollution, and absorbing it quite quickly. They're not really sure why these trees haven't yet cleared the entire glade, or if the tiny glade that they live in was the result of one such very productive tree. What they do know is that the trees are absorbing pollution now. And they're hopeful that they can use this mechanism to their advantage. If by some miracle, a tiny sprout of ambrosia that only Megahoof had ever read about in mythological books just sprouted in the middle of their farm. Sapo and Lazarus carefully plot out where the sprouts are so that the ambrosia can grow uninterrupted, uncut. Perhaps it will live up to its lore and mythology and taste like the fruit of the gods. Another task that they think will be very important is to keep their foods from spoiling. Nobody here really knows the properties of rice. They've forgotten. So keeping the rice from spoiling and then make sure that it is preserved for the winter is something that Sapo is concerned about. The mushrooms back home were kept in root cellars, so Sapo thinks that something similar might be useful here. They're not sure what kind of weather or seasons this glade has. Looking out, it looks like it used to be a forest. It used to be, but not any longer. Judea goes to the horizon and breaks down some scavenged market carts stuck in the marsh for the components that they contain, and also spots some additional trees, old battlefields, and ruins of the metallic visitors. Sapo is concerned about the sightings of ruins of metallic visitors. As rumor has it, the metallic visitors never leave survivors. And he worries that the ruins of these visitors will once reawaken, as if in some hibernation or slumber, to do them harm, and asks Lazarus to take care of it in the morning. Lazarus agrees. The last of the dried meat will be preserved, just in case the rice meals are inedible. It's not enough food to bring them all back home, but it's enough, if rationed, that one could send for help. The dusty mess that Tangier kicks up is disturbing Megahoof's science, and he asks that some sort of dust barrier be constructed to keep his work from being disrupted. The land reclamation, turning mountain into caves, is very well known to the Adlets. This is how they survived on the coast, after all. The coast was still polluted, as was the oceans, but the caves stayed pristine. Lazarus, to fulfill his promise to Sapo, sets out to destroy the ancient technology. Early in the wee hours, in the cover of darkness, and alone, he smashes. The metals crumble and turn to rubble and debris. Hopefully this will satisfy his friend. Megahoof is back to hitting the books once again, trying to understand textile spinning, how looms work, how to keep them clothed and warm in cold winters. Their fur might be thick, but winter's bitter chill can bite even the furriest of Adlets. Judea feels nauseous and is not sure why. The rice out in the farm fields normally would be vulnerable to birds and vermin, but because this glade has so few to prey upon it, the priority of bringing it indoors and keeping it protected is pretty low. The efforts of the squires are probably better used elsewhere. Remnants of old battlefields might be scavenged for the potential of reclaiming some metals from the land. So, despite the fact that this poses a considerable threat to the health of the adlets being in the pollution for that long, this task is deemed appropriate. Such a large swath of rice to harvest. Sapo surveys and sees that Lazarus has fulfilled his promise to clear out the ancient debris, and thanks Lazarus as they pick rice together out in the fields. Lazarus says, if you see any more of it, just let me know. I'll deal with it. I enjoy it. Smashing the components, smashing their constructions brings me joy, knowing that they have spent resources to build it, and I can remove it with just a few swings. Megahoof finishes understanding how to spin cotton and linen. But most of the others are asleep. And he makes a unilateral decision to start to understand smithing. He had read a lot of history books as a child, and he has realized that smithing is not as complicated as it might sound. Identifying the right rocks and ores and separating them out, that's all that needs to be done. He thinks to himself that in the morning, he'll talk to one of the others and say, maybe they could go surveying, looking around for appropriate ores that might yield iron or coke or coal. Judea also thinks that keeping the cave that they're expanding into clean might in some way discourage pollution or vermin. So even though it's very labor intensive, he asks the others to chip in. Megahoof relays his idea to Lazarus to look for ores. And Lazarus says that he doesn't understand what exactly he's looking for, and that it might be best for Megahoof to look for himself. Megahoof asks Tangier to do it. Tangier is, after all, the one most familiar with ores and minerals, and Tangier agrees. Tangier, heading south, identifies a small node of coal. This could be useful for smelting, and also salt, for salting meats. The Adlets don't eat a lot of meat. They don't believe in the slaughter of creatures. Rounding the corner, some iron ore, which is crucial. He knows it. And off on the horizon, some strange planks floating in the muck. Decides to take a break from the survey to bring this back to the community. Tangier relays that she has found some iron and coal to the south, and Megahuth says that he is working on understanding how to smith, and it might be prudent to go exploit those resources for the benefit of the rest of the group. Tangier agrees. Without a further thought, sets off south to first get the coal. Judea continues to cut stone, knowing that these stones will be put to use as strong and sturdy castle walls in no time. With the understanding of thick walls unlocked by Megahoof, the technique of laying stone for added protection, the new cave that they are annexing will be protected better than their initial construction project, costing considerably more, but it will be a good way to protect an inner sanctum. Tangier returns from mining excursion, and Megahoof informs her that she has indeed identified coal, and that will act as a fuel source and a carbon source. But they still don't really understand how bloomeries work. Not yet. Sapo dreams of fields of rice and wheat. The amount of food that they are able to procure in just such a short period of time, but a few days, maybe a week at most, is enough to feed most of their community back home. Dreams of plenty motivate Sapo to keep the community fed and the farms sown. Sapo feels a little badly for the bison. The land designated for the bison are so fully stripped of resources that there's nothing for them to naturally graze upon. Seppo thinks that maybe sowing some hay grass in there for them will give them something to eat. This might not be an economical use of their time, but is a kindness that they're now able to afford. Lazarus agrees and gets to sewing. The floor space is starting to look a bit messy and ridiculous, with rice piles strewn about and jars of tar, bricks and coal, components and meals all mixed in. Seppo asks Judea if it might be possible to keep it cleaner. And Judea agrees. Some sort of order has to be found here. This is then requested of her fiancé to start to unlock the mysteries of joinery, storage, and the like. Megahoof, so pleased that they're planning for the future, proposes, and it is agreed upon that the two shall marry. A designated spot right next to the first dining table. A small but noble designation. Megahoof told Changier that it's time to start getting iron instead of more coal. That understanding smithing has progressed tremendously, and the variety will help them with their metal production in short order. With all of the ample rice that they now have, the squires feel generous. The wild creatures are stuck scavenging what little there is to eat in their brutal, short, and polluted lives, and thinks to themselves that it might be righteous to supply a little rice to the wilds. And the rest agree. Megahoof screams Eureka, disturbing the sleep of the others. Apologizes and says that he has unlocked the mysteries of smithing and smelting. And he'll point out to Judea in the morning how to construct a furnace and anvil, so that they might be able to smelt their own ores. Tangier is exhausted, returns with just a tiny bit of iron. Mining does not come naturally to Adlets. They're terrible at it. They struggled and toiled in the mines, carving out the coastal cities was brutal, labor-intensive, and Tangier's first job. With understanding textile spinning, textiles alone won't be enough to clothe them. Putting the textiles together in patterns is crucially important. Interweaving them for layered protection, gambesons, and cloaks. This was the way of their forefathers, and this was a technology that Megahoof wished to understand. Tangier had a plan for the mountain area. Excavating it, she thought that it might be wise to cluster alike industries together for organization and opportunity to improve the livelihoods of the rest of the 5 by separating out smelting from bedrooms. For the fumes of the smelter and the noise of the hammer isn't conducive to sleep. And sleep is much needed by these sleepy atlets. Story of the pristine glade encouraged some other atlet youngsters to come to their door. Megahoof wondered how far these 4 youngsters wandered in order to arrive here. Regardless of what they were asking, they were going to receive it. Is this the children of a trading party? A search crew? Who knows? But they ask for little alms, and they are supplied. They accept the requested items and make their way south, hopefully back home to the coastal town. The 5 squires didn't know these youngsters, but they weren't visitors. The villages, the coastal towns that they had originated from, was large enough that not everybody knew everybody else. They were dispersed in a large footprint so as to not attract visitors, kept separate on purpose so that smaller individual communities could fall, but society as a whole could withstand the raids. The first smelter is constructed. And because coal is such a scarce resource, raw wood will be used instead. And the first run of iron ore put through the smelter. Exactly how they predicted, this small foothold of a mountain perfectly withstood the onslaught of pollution over the last 250 years, and everything that Tangier excavates is clean. Perfectly clean. Megahoof celebrates, wandering the hop fields. The first of the iron ingots have been smelted. And thinks that now that they're more than just a fledgling community, it might be the right time to designate a shepherd amongst them for morale. Since Tangier took it upon herself to designate the areas and point out how to expand, the 5 think it's suiting to have her as the shepherd of the group. A little ritual spot at the foot of the smelter is designated, and once Judea finishes the castle wall section, a modest little ritual is undertaken. The five gather around a central spot and talk about how their plans to expand this community and how to contact their original group and bring in new colonists, new adlets to fill their ranks. Tangier thinks this is the way. This is what our forefathers and foremothers would have wanted. A very modest celebration in the dim lit of torchlight brings the ritual to a conclusion. However, in that ritual, they realize they don't have a true leader. Maybe they don't need one, but they would like one. And it is decided that Megahoof be named Alpha of the Pack. They realize that Megahoof might not be the toughest or strongest, but Megahoof has the brains and charisma to lead them to a brighter future. And this is critically important in dark times. Megahoof was slow to accept, but ultimately decided that if all of them chipped together and everybody else wanted him to lead, then lead he shall. For his fiancée is with child. Sapo twiddles his thumbs, not really sure what to do. Idle time was not something they ever really had back home. This was much because back home, it was so rare that they had enough food to go around that all idle time was designated to scavenging. But Sapo thinks that it might be possible to grow some crop around the strange and twisted plants out in the wild. And because he understands how to grow rice, thinks that it might be best to try to grow rice first, something familiar, to make sure that this process works. With the smelter constructed, the new iron will be used in a furnace, but more iron will have to be obtained for an anvil. Tangier will have to be sent back to the mountains, and Tangier knows it and is not happy about this prospect. Traversing the polluted land is hard on the body, and being alone and isolated, attempting to mine, is somewhat miserable. Judea, although pregnant, is starting to become sick from all of the construction taking place outside, and decides that after this section of the castle walls, to take a break for her own health and benefit. Lazarus, taking direction from Sapo's initiative, starts to sow around the strange tree, making sure that the tree is left intact and undisturbed. For the tree works miracles, and they don't want to disrupt miracles. Judea decides that if she can't chip away at constructing the walls around the little foothills, she'll spend her time instead smoothing out the inside of the cave and making it nice and comfortable for the rest. Megahoof, agreeing to Sapo's requests, for a way to organize and to store resources, fulfills that request, and embarks upon understanding shelving and storage and other carpentry tasks. The Adlet squires decide that if the rice was so easy to sow at the tree closest to home, perhaps the other trees can sow seeds as well. The one thing they also realized is that sowing wild crop also means that the animals of this tile might eat those seeds. Maybe this is a good way to attract more animals to their area to support the local wildlife, or maybe they'll be able to harvest it in time. They don't know. But they're set to task. And will start to sow as much as they can. There are considerably more waste rats and rats out in the wild than there were even when they first arrived a mere few weeks ago. Seppa also thinks that he might be able to turn some of this polluted soil into productive farmland, despite its pollution. Some crops are hardier than others, much like that weird twisted tree. And wants to try to plant some special teas in order for everybody else to enjoy. Tangier tucks into the mountainside where it is not as polluted to not fall ill while mining the iron. The youngsters must have told tale of this small hamlet, because a fellow Adlet beckons a child no older than 7, begs them to have her join, and they agree. The whole purpose of this tiny community was to support youngsters like her. So she is offered a place amongst them, a separate bed designated just for her. They do have, however, one condition: that she was not to wander beyond the castle walls. Although no sightings of the visitors had been made yet, they all worried that it was only a matter of time until danger beckoned at their door. As strong-headed as Adlets are known to be, the generosity of the squires moved the young Adlet, and she agreed that yes, she would abide by that singular rule. So they took out a map and carefully scrawled out where she could go and where she shouldn't for her own protection. She could wander the rice paddies. She could pet the bison. She could even go in and see the smelter in action. But not wander beyond that. Even the waste rats around this area were known to occasionally get aggressive. and they didn't want anything to befall her. Tangier grumbles as she goes to sleep, regretting ever undertaking the mining of the iron. Lucia shows up with barely any clothes on her back, a silly little hat on her head, and a very tattered shirt. Her community must have been raided. If she's here without adults, she probably has some tragic story to tell, but she doesn't tell it willingly. The rest of them know what this sort of tragedy looks like. It hits communities just like hers all the time. Without wanting to trigger any of her traumatic memories, they all agree that she'll tell her tale when it is time. Megahoof has a little experience in dealing with youngsters, as does Tangier. They both had younger siblings. Siblings are very rare for the Adlets to have many of. Once upon a time, they had huge packs and numbered in a dozen. But nowadays, it's rare to have any more than one or two siblings, for mouths to feed are difficult to support. With the understanding of rustic storage, some sense of order can be brought to the now expansive stockpiles littering the floors all around their tiny little hamlet. Some basic shelving for the food, and perhaps a barrel for coal and a barrel for iron. Modest, but absolutely necessary. Very large shelf designated just for the rice to keep it from spoiling. Youngster very happy to chip in, following the rules of the Adlets to the letter. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode of Hedge Knights. If you have any feedback for me, please let me know in the comments below. If you would like to support me as a content creator, please either consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Rhadamant or joining my gaming community, rhadamant.com/Discord. Thank you so very much for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode, or perhaps another stream of mine. Farewell, my fellow Adlets.